We know the Russians aren't 10 feet tall, but here's another thing that we know. They can do a lot of damage, and in Ukraine, they have. They've seized Crimea, basically annexed the Sea of Azov, waged war in the country's eastern Donbass region, politicized international energy transactions, carried out cyber attacks and disinformation campaigns, and interfered in elections. But Ukraine is far away, so why should we care? Because Ukraine is Russia's backyard testbed for tactics it goes on to use around the world, from civil wars in Syria and Libya to elections in the United States, France, and the Brexit referendum in the UK. The West has clear interests in Ukraine, protecting the 5 NATO allies that surround it, ensuring freedom of passage in the Black Sea, and preserving the principles of sovereignty and the inviolability of international borders. These goals are better served with Ukraine as an independent, constructive partner than as a destabilized vassal state of Russia. Russia may be a waning power, but there's no reason to think it will give up its campaigns of expansion and disruption. The cost has been low so far. The world is distracted by the coronavirus pandemic, a rising China, and frankly, unprecedented political upheaval and dysfunction in the United States. But if the West doesn't present a strong front now, Russia could miscalculate later, whether in cyberspace or on terra firma, in a way we may not be able to accept. And what would we do then? We don't know what Russia will do next in Ukraine or anywhere else, but we must prepare for more aventura, as they say in Russia. In theory, the US has a sound Ukraine policy, but it's been undercut by a lack of buy-in and contradictory messaging from the top. Our national security team second guesses itself. US allies in Europe and elsewhere are increasingly alarmed. The Ukrainians are losing confidence in American support, and the Russians believe they have carte blanche. The US needs to start by getting its own house in order. The power of our example has been our greatest advantage, attracting allies and emulators, but we've fallen short on the rule of law, freedom of the press, the value of diversity, and more. We need to fix that. The West will need to continue to provide critical assistance to Ukraine while holding Ukrainian politicians accountable to their own commitments to reforms, the reforms that the Ukrainian people have demanded since at least 2004. That means helping with defense, economic growth, and anti-corruption efforts. It also means sharpening sanctions, resolving the war in the Donbass, and ensuring that no one forgets or accepts what Russia did in Crimea. And the West needs to engage Russia too, but from a position of strength, collaborating on shared interests and standing firm where our paths diverge. We need to use the old public diplomacy tools of the Cold War and the new tools of the internet era, not just to reach the Ukrainian and Russian people directly, but also to combat disinformation and attacks from malign actors. We can succeed if we remain united here in the US and with our allies in creating incentives, establishing guardrails, and levying costs. Russia sees Ukraine as its testing ground. The West needs to use that ground to prove that strong democracies can and will prevail.